Welcome to the Retrospect podcast, a show where people come together from different walks of life and discuss a topic from their generation's perspective. My name is Ian, and as always, I'm joined by Stoney.
Hello.
And today we actually have a very special guest. He's a friend of yours.
Yes.
Stoney. His name's Jason. Is that right?
Yeah, okay. That's me. Hello, everyone.
So we have the X generation represented yet once again on the podcast.
I'm not going to lie. Whenever the record button hit and I was like really going through this, I was like, I really hope his name is Jason because that's what I'm going with. I only met him just now. So I was like, I feel bad if I say his name wrong right at the top. So, but
popular name now.
Right. Okay.
You want to share anything about yourself with us, or are you just here for the ride? Or?
I'm here for the ride, and I'm curious to see how this goes.
Cool.
Well, this is our holiday Halloween episode.
Right.
And the topic of conversation tonight is going to be basically Jeffrey Dahmer and serial killers. There is a lot of buzz about the Netflix series Dahmer. Miranda and I tried to watch it in preparation for the show. And I got through the first episode and I'm like, no, there's too much theatrical license in it.
Really?
It was terrible. You don't know that this stuff actually happened.
Really?
There's only a couple of people alive in it. And it's too much theatrical license. It was not very good.
Okay.
But Jeffrey Dahmer, he was something.
Yeah.
You remember anything about him?
Well, I mean, I do remember at the time when it was making national news. I'm curious. You're saying the show was too much theatrical license. What do you really mean by that? I mean, did you do any research on the show itself and where they got their source material to be able to do that?
It's not really like a documentary. It is more like someone's interpretation of how the relationships and events happened.
I've heard fantasized.
Yes, it's over fantasized.
Right,
it's just somebody kind of writing a script on this is what happened,
making it like a fancy action movie out of like things that actually happened.
Right. And there's no real substance to it. It's they're making words up for the relationships, and it just felt wrong.
Right.
I don't feel like it did justice to the victims or anything like that. And it was just somebody in Hollywood writing a script.
Interesting.
I'd be curious if they actually interviewed family members of Jeffrey Dahmer.
Mm-hmm.
That would have been interesting. I don't know if they did or not, as
right.
far as the producers of the show.
Right.
I've been listening to some podcasts and just watching some like videos here and there about there's a lot of books on the matter, but I wasn't going to purchase any books for this because I was like, I don't really want to go through all that. But there's like a lot of the shows that I was listening to and watching. They took a more realistic approach where it was like, this is
and
kind
that's
of
if I want to do something, I want to watch a documentary where they do research, where someone just made a drama about it.
Right.
It would be like watching a television show that somebody made up in Dallas or something like that. This really
made
didn't
it too
happen.
pretty looking.
You didn't know how it happened. Did this conversation really happen? No, but they made conversation. It wasn't real. It wasn't a documentary. It's just a drama about Jeffrey Dahmer.
Weird.
I mean, do you know how many people he supposedly killed?
Was it like 17 or 18?
Well, he's accounted for 17 men and boys
Mm-hmm.
over his career from 1978 to 1991.
Mm-hmm.
And the last couple of so many victims, necrophilia and cannibalism was paramount in what he was doing.
Right.
And it became part of his thing. But there were so many times that the police were involved and other people were involved. They actually brought one of the victims back to his house because they thought it was just a domestic dispute and left him.
Yikes.
Yeah.
I remember that.
Yeah, that's crazy to hear. Though the show that I had listened to, recently that said the most about it was like they kind of went into some of his like parents and stuff, like his home life, and how like how do you put this? They had talked about how like there's a lot of serial killers, like you can like really trace it back to like a few like key things like in their childhood and their adolescence, like all these different like kind of like waypoints or like checkpoints that you can hit, like in like like looking back on their life. And it's like, oh, that probably is what caused them to kind of be this.
Well,
this
it's
way.
that, and it's something in the brain.
Right.
There is a disorder, psychopath or sociopath that you can't diagnose somebody with until they're 18. Right. And the precursor to that is ODD, oppositional defiance disorder, that someone before 18 gets a diagnosis of. And I don't know why that diagnosis can't happen. They have all of the markers. Everything's the same. Right. It's just they wait until they're 18 before, I guess they want to put that stigma on somebody. And maybe there's hope. Maybe there's help for them. And if you can't correct it, then this is where it leads.
Yikes.
Yes.
It makes me think of those like checkpoints like I'm talking about, you know, in a person's life or in a kid's life. Like how much little things like that in people's lives like can really compound and make you who you are, whether it be like a functioning adult in society or like this kind of person. And it's like, it's just crazy to think that like how there are possibly pitfalls and things that you like there are opportunities in that person's life, in that child's life, or whatever they like that you could either make or break this person in like in a really catastrophic way. And it's crazy that's and obviously other genetic things like you're saying, like
I think things are changing because the 60s, 70s, and 80s was really the heyday of the serial killer. That was the prime time for serial killers because not as many people during that time went missing. So many people go missing today that get lost in the cracks. So maybe they do, or maybe they don't get attributed to a serial killer. Louisiana is ranked 5th in states that produce serial killers in America.
Gosh.
And
that's unbelievable.
It's almost embarrassing.
It really is.
Right.
But if you look back at it, first off, do you know how Dahmer died?
Didn't he die in prison?
He died in prison.
Or
he was
like
murdered. One guy said that God told me to kill him, and he beat 2 people to death. They were actually left unsupervised, 3 of them, in the shower. And the guy supposedly said he didn't premeditate it, but he left the bar ahead of time to beat him with. But I guess if God told him to do it, and he killed 2 people that day who passed. And they're trying to, I read an article where they didn't want him to become some type of a martyr or a folk hero or something for killing Jeffrey Dahmer. And Jeffrey Dahmer wanted his ashes. He wanted to be cremated, and his ashes were split between his mom and his dad.
Wow.
And I went, hello. I didn't know that part.
Yeah, no.
I knew he was killed in prison, but
did he, during his autopsy, did they, and I don't know anything post-Dahmer as far as what they may have found out, but was his brain a different size? I mean, didn't they, I think somehow recall something about they found something with his brain that was different?
I think there was. I don't remember that exact study, but I remember hearing something about that too. So, but part of the diagnosis is a brain disorder. That's something. There's a disconnect there, right? And it comes very early on, and it starts with some markers: abusing animals, a lot of lying.
Oh yeah.
Having no remorse for things, or then the really big one is the manipulation of people around you. And all of the serial killers were just very, very good at manipulation. So,
another big thing that I had heard about Jeffrey Dahmer specifically is his mom was like heavily alcoholic, and that was one thing that he also was, like, from the age of 13 or so. He was like a very heavy alcoholic, and used that as like a crutch in some way for his like entire life. That always kind of came back up, which is another just crazy thing that you were 13 years old drinking enough to get drunk. That's like, it's crazy.
And then if you think about it, and this is something that's kind of always bugged me, just the chemicals that we're eating on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
You know, bread used to have 3 ingredients in it. Now it has 31 to 36 ingredients.
Yeah.
What are we really doing to ourselves? And then you add all of the stimulant from video and gaming and movies and the social media. Now we've affected the brain, and now we're gearing it towards something with social media and the instant gratification of things that you can do now via the internet. So, I mean, that's just, to me, that just...
The only thing I'm able to find right here, just off the top really quick, is it said that his body was cremated at the time of his death, but Dahmer's brain was preserved whilst his parents argued over whether or not it should be given to science to be studied. In the meantime, the brain was preserved in formaldehyde. So I don't know what happened after that, but that's the only thing I could just like look in a quick Google search. So that's...
So you say the brain was preserved?
Right. I'm not sure if it's still preserved or not, but again, while I guess scientists wanted to try and study his brain, and his parents argued over whether or not they should or shouldn't do it, so they just preserved it in formaldehyde.
I'd be very curious if they've done the same with some of the other serial killers in the past, like John Wayne Gacy or who's the other one that was from Florida? Bundy.
Yeah, Ted Bundy.
Ted Bundy. Yep. Green River Killer.
Mm-hmm. And even like...
But again, he was another one who was good-looking guy, super intelligent, very manipulative, but there was a disconnect there, and he hit every marker. Abuse of animals, lying, manipulation, all of these things. So have y'all ever heard of any of these? The Long Island serial killer.
No.
This is the biggest unsolved mystery in New York history. The case is still ongoing.
What year was it?
He's still active.
What year?
Still active.
I mean,
it's been going on.
When did it start?
They're not sure, because until you find the person, you know, you don't know all of their victims yet. So, how about this one? The Chicago serial killer. Victim count, they believe to be 70 or higher.
Jesus.
That's incredible.
Isn't that insane? This serial killer came into the limelight when the Chicago Tribune ran a story in 2020. But the investigators have a lot of DNA samples that they couldn't really understand or take. How about this one? The Killing Field Murders.
Never heard of that one.
That's right. These are all active today. These are the most dangerous ones today. On near Interstate 45 is a dumping ground for killers everywhere, mafia and otherwise. But so far they found 4 victims associated with this killer. 2 of them were identified in 2019. The Jeff Davis 8.
What is that?
Why aren't we hearing about these more? Remember when Ted Bundy came out? This was like all over the news. So this name was given to 8 killings that happened between 2005 and 2009. They were all from Jennings, Louisiana.
Wow.
Their murder or murderers is still at large.
I guess Jennings doesn't make national news.
I guess not. What about the Highway of Tears killer? This is between Prince Rupert and Prince George in Canada.
Wow.
Not the princes. I guess that's 2 highways or something.
There's 2 places, yeah.
You're the Canadian expert here.
There's 2 different places called that.
There have been so many bodies found along this stretch that it is known as the Highway of Tears. So that's another active serial killer. West Mensa murders. The first remains were found in February 2nd of 2005 in Albuquerque. This killer has not. There are more bodies just found, and they haven't found this one either. Colonial Parkway murders. This killer is still around. There are 8 murders which are said to be the work of the same person. Smiley face killers.
Wow.
The victims are all college-age white men who have been found drowned due to alcohol. They've been investigating to see if this is the work of one killer or many. The victims are believed to have been targeted due to their privileged status by a group or person who leaves behind smiley face graffiti.
The crazy thing about like all this too is like, I was just about to say how it feels like you were saying the heyday for like serial killing being in like the 70s and 80s, because like what I would wager it is because of like lack of technology, lack of communication between like you know mass communication between like between people. So I'm thinking like for me, if I was to come up with like an excuse as to why that's probably the case, like back in like the 70s and 80s, like I can understand how like times were different then. Like you let your kids just go out and play in the afternoon, just like let them be. And then, but you also didn't really like keep tabs on them either, like, or they had no way to contact them. So it's like, or just people in general didn't really have an easy way of just like, again, you can't just reach in your pocket and go call your mom, like you can now. So that's what I thought it was. But now you're saying this whole list of people that I'm like, that's crazy to think that they're still.
Back in the day, you had 3 TV stations,
right.
And you had the main public newspaper of the time for the city. But right now, we're oversaturated with information. Does it, other than the specific area that you're in, are they going to put that information out? Ted Bundy was put out because he was killing over a wide spread of area, but Derek Todd Lee was Baton Rouge. Some of these other people are very specific in that. They try to get the information out, but it just doesn't get out where it's supposed to, everywhere.
Right.
So the FBI and other world law agencies have stated there can be up to 1,000 serial killers active in the world at any given time.
That's crazy.
That's really amazing to actually think about that. But I'd like to kind of focus in on, you're saying that the 60s and the 70s was that kind of that growing that seed, so to speak. I do believe the idea of people were more trusting. And
right.
And I think that is probably one of the bigger things why their victims were probably more easily identified and targeted, and simply because people did not, we think about it today, everybody now is somewhat paranoid.
Yeah.
We operate basically in a paranoid society.
Right.
Because we're waiting for somebody to sneak out from the other side and take advantage of us. I remember as a child, life just wasn't that way.
Right.
Not to say there was not caution, but it was different.
I grew up in like the late 90s, early 2000s, and I feel like I was on like the tail end of all that, where like I still had some of this freedom, but at the same time, like I feel like I was in that transitional period, like maybe not so aggressively as others, but even more so, where it's like even some of the things that I was doing, like unsupervised, doing certain things or in a neighborhood, whereas like now that's not an okay sort of thing. It's just I talk about my childhood, about how like, I did this, and this, and of course people that are in my age range are like, I would never let my kid do that, and I was like, okay, if you say so. Like, one thing that like I had heard recently, looking up serial killers and stuff like that, is the difference between, now again, I'm not sure if this is like an actual terminology or something like that, or if this is just like a slang of some kind, or whatever. But there are a lot of times for serial killers, there are product killers and process killers, is what they were saying. And talking about that is like Jeffrey Dahmer, for instance, was a product killer. Like he wasn't killing because he wanted like the renown for it, or he enjoyed the process of it. It was because he wanted the body afterwards for whatever.
But he's one of the few
nefarious
that
things.
wanted the body.
What's what I'm saying.
A lot of them want
right.
the notoriety.
That's what I'm saying. But there are supposedly like categories that you can look at where throughout history, numerous
Oddly
serial
enough,
killers.
I have something on some categories here.
Okay,
for
okay,
you.
great.
I
Well, the
thought
other
you
one
might go that route.
Yeah, the other one that I was going to talk about was like the process is like they, I want to say, Ted Bundy or no. It was one of them that enjoyed like that got the rush and thrill out of killing the person.
Well,
but then
they
didn't.
all have that. They all have that. It all stems from the killing, and their
Right.
first killing is the most satisfying
But-
to them.
but-
and then going forward from that it never has the same.
But I would disagree with that to a certain degree because a lot of the stuff I was doing research on for Dahmer, there was no rush in killing. He actually would drink and get super blackout drunk so that he could proceed with killing the person and then would
Well,
as
Jeffrey
it was a
Dahmer is
product.
the exception to most of the rules.
Yeah, I'm just saying
He
that
is,
there
but as
are
a general rule,
yeah.
the serial killers,
Right.
the first one is the most satisfying, and then they try to
crazy.
replicate that and can never get that same rush
Yikes.
that they get from the first one. So who is the craziest serial killer?
Oh God, I don't even.
They've
Dr.
probably had.
H.8 Holmes.
Hannibal Lecter.
Yeah, I mean, no
And his
doubt.
murder
I
castle.
would agree with you on that.
Okay. Who was the most successful serial killer?
I don't.
Harold Shipman, a British doctor who probably killed as many as 250 people. His victims went unnoticed because his victims were mostly elderly, and those deaths were likely not to cause suspicion.
Yikes.
Who is the scariest serial killer?
I don't know.
This is a list of a number of them. You might recognize a couple of these names, Jason. Ted Bundy.
Yeah.
David Berkowitz, the son of Sam.
That's right. Forgot
The
about him.
Zodiac Killer,
Oh,
who's
yeah.
never been caught yet.
That's right.
Jeffrey Dahmer. Jack the Ripper is actually a serial killer,
Really?
and they've never put that together. John Wayne Gacy,
Yeah, John Wayne Gacy.
Killer
Yep.
Clown.
Killer Clown, and Andrew Cunanan. They are among the most frightening criminals in history. Who was the first serial killer in the world?
I don't know.
They attribute that to H.H. Holmes, previously mentioned in his murder castle, and he died in 1896 in Philadelphia.
Do you guys know the one that I heard about that I read on a little bit that was just, it disgusted me in a whole new way that I didn't hear on the list was Ed Gein.
Yeah, I've heard that one.
The one where he like took people's skin and like made things out of it, like masks and a skin suit or whatever, and like lampshades and other just stuff. Like, oh gosh, like the more I had like read on that and looked at it, I was like, that is so. Oh God, that makes me feel some type of way, and it's not good.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
I did a little research, and I guess I kept the fact of Louisiana being the 5th in the nation in producing serial killers kind of got to me. I love Louisiana. I've been here most of my life. I moved around a while, but I always come home. But I found a list of the most notorious serial killers in Louisiana history. Danny Rolling. He was the Gainesville Ripper. He was originally from Shreveport, and he's said to have been responsible for 8 killings. They were 5 college students in Florida, but he was from Louisiana. I don't remember.
When did he get arrested?
In 1990 was when he killed the 5 college students in Florida. So he confessed to a triple homicide in Shreveport prior to his execution.
In Louisiana.
Yikes.
Ronald Joseph Domain. He was called the Bayou Serial Killer. He was confessed and was convicted of killing 23 men in Terrebonne Parish, Lafourche, Iberville, and Jefferson parishes. They took place between, think about this, 23 men between 1997 and 2007.
Wow.
That's a lot of people in a 10-year period of time, if you think about that. he was sentenced to 8 life sentences.
Is that Angola?
I do not know. I didn't. That was not on this list here.
So I'm curious, is that Louisiana's 5th? Who's first?
I didn't go past my state being the 5th. I guess we could look that up.
I was curious who's 1 through 4.
I'm just curious if y'all have actually heard of any of these names, because this is like serious. Clementine Barnabas, the Voodoo Murders.
Sounds like a comic book character.
This is the most prolific female serial killer in Louisiana. Now, normally they're guys. Now, there's occasionally a girl come do this. She confessed to 35 murders between 1911 and 1912.
Holy cow!
Almost like a Black Widow kind of type of,
Yeah.
That's crazy.
She claimed that they were part of the Church of Sacrifice in Lake Charles.
Oh my gosh! What the heck?
Yes, and she was convicted of the murders in 2012, but mysteriously released from prison in 1923 and disappeared after her release.
That's crazy.
How about that one? Samuel Little.
That's a little bit of a mystery there.
Samuel Little. That name ring a bell? He confessed to 93 killings, 60 of which were confirmed.
60.
He confessed to at least 6 killings in Louisiana. This one might ring a bell. Nathaniel Code, Shreveport serial killer. Between 84 and 1987, he committed murders. He killed 8 people, including his own grandfather.
Yikes.
He was sentenced to death in 89.
That's crazy.
Derek Todd Lee, the Baton Rouge serial killer.
I had a friend of mine that worked for the DA's office at the time. He was telling me about the amount of phone calls they were getting. It was a time. I really felt bad for many of the ladies that were really just psychologically traumatized during that time. I'd never seen so many people just so afraid to just leave their house.
I remember those times. That was absolutely insane. How about this one? The Axeman of New Orleans.
Gosh.
That name in itself is interesting.
Sounds like a horror movie.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, it does. Between May of 1918 and October of 1919, 12 people were attacked with an axe in the New Orleans area. Half of them died from their injuries.
Wow. That just sounds like a man. Just
never been found.
Really? Okay, that's interesting. I just thought that sounded like a man who was just angry on like a drunken night out.
That would be a movie, right?
That's a movie. That's a horror movie.
Yeah. Maybe that's where some of these horror movies get their ideas from.
100%. I mean, isn't that kind of what Halloween, like the mask and all that kind of stuff? That I don't know. It was supposed to be it was supposed to be scary on purpose. The fact that it looked like someone else's skin on that guy's head.
And then I guess the last famous Louisiana serial killer you mentioned earlier, John Allen Muhammad, the D.C. sniper.
What year was that? I'm trying to remember.
2002, wasn't it? Wasn't it the early 2000s? I think
it would seem like we just, it was when it rains, it pours, because it was all kind of stuff going on.
So much
because I remember, like, say, out of this entire United States, you would think, what are the odds that you have all this activity basically centered in one little small city,
right,
in South Louisiana?
That's right.
I mean, it's just
because he was from Baton Rouge.
He was from Baton Rouge.
Baton Rouge.
I mean, that's just.
Now, I think they found out that through all of the killings that what was the kid? What was the
Malvo?
Malvo. It was to hide the murder of Malvo's mother, and they were trying to hide it in just a barrage of killings so that no one could tie them to it or tie him to it. And he brainwashed Malvo into doing this.
Yeah, because I think the kid when eventually Muhammad got caught, I don't think the kid went to prison. I think they let him off.
Oh, really? I don't remember.
I don't recall him going to prison. I could be wrong with that. I think because, just like you said, he brainwashed him. So I think the sympathy
That's crazy.
because he was young,
and
he was just affected by. I guess this guy had a lot of charisma.
Yeah.
And
most of them do. You know, Ted Bundy again, very charismatic, got a lot of people to do what he wanted, and he was very prolific as far as a serial killer goes.
One kind of funny and also terrifying story to think about, and it really makes me understand why I think people are so paranoid now, for good reason, is I'm pretty sure I read that the first time that Jeffrey Dahmer killed somebody, it was in like a drunken stupor, and it was not on purpose, and he basically chopped up his body, put it into trash bags, and was in like the dark of night gonna go like dispose of it in the woods or something, and he got pulled over that night because he was driving slightly left of center. Sorry, I couldn't speak. So he got pulled over, and then whenever he was asked, like if he wasn't drunk or whatever, I supposedly at that time, but whenever he was asked, like, what is the trash bags and what is that stench in the car, he basically said that he was trying to get out of his house and get away from his parents, and he needed some fresh air and was going to go like take this trash to like the city dump or whatever, and they just basically let him go. And because they were just like, oh, it's fine, that's fine.
Well, that happened a lot. His apartments apparently stunk because he kept some of the bodies in a 55-gallon drum in the apartment.
Yeah,
that's right.
And it stunk. And there was the next door neighbor, this old woman who kept complaining, kept calling the police, kept calling everybody, and nobody would listen to her.
Yeah.
And they had so many opportunities to catch him, and they didn't, because he just could manipulate his way out of it.
That's crazy.
I
just think, if I'm being 100% honest here, I think I'm too honest of a person that I could ever get away with murder. I don't think I could ever do it. I like realistically sitting here, I'm like,
well, let's look at that. So
I don't think I could.
What defines a serial killer?
I mean,
the definition of a serial killer is a person who has committed at least 2 acts of murder. Okay. So is a mafia hitman a serial killer?
Probably.
Yes.
No.
Really?
Yep. Because it's and they define this as a hitman is a person who kills for money, some other payment, or influence. So the third party objectives pull that away from being a serial killer. A serial killer doesn't always know why they do something. They are driven. Sense. There's a voice. There's something. There's some act, something that happens that they need.
Yeah.
Jeffrey Dahmer, his killings matured from his first one to where he wanted to have sex with the bodies and eat them. He always had that in him, but it had to grow and come out. He didn't know why he was doing it until the end. But a serial contract killer, they may exhibit the same traits, but are not classified as such generally because of the third-party objectives, detached financial and emotional incentives.
Wow, that's crazy.
So it's a psychological component that...
Right.
Instead of a
sociopath
killer.
or psychopath,
right.
that makes that...
Well, it kind of feels the same thing of like being like in the military of some kind. It's like you can probably kill potentially handfuls of people, but it's not like you're not. I mean, you would wager they're probably not getting any kind of enjoyment out of this. It's like there is a goal, there is a opposition, in that regards. Like you wouldn't really consider that a serial killer. There's no like psychological.
Or you were given an order to do it.
Yeah, right, yeah.
So would the person who gives the order,
or even
be the serial killer?
Even if we're talking about like police officers in the same way, it's like that's you have a job where it's like that. There you could potentially have to.
There is psychological trauma.
Oh, 100%.
In any time, what I would call a normal, well-adjusted person that would have to do something like that.
Right.
That's why there's such problems with soldiers coming back from battle.
Yeah.
Because our very nature, we are not programmed to take life. We're designed to preserve life.
That's right.
We fight to stay alive.
Right.
I think there's, I forget the percentage, but I believe it's less than 5% of the population that I call natural-born killers.
Okay.
Natural born killers are people that can take life and not suffer any sort of psychological consequence from their action.
Right.
And that's a very, very rare individual. Doesn't make them bad people, and it doesn't make them want to be murderers or anything like that. It's just for whatever reason, the way their brain is structured, that they can take life and they can just keep on going as if it was just any other day.
It's interesting you say that. I'm a firearms instructor outside of the podcast. And when you're teaching somebody how to use a weapon, rifle or pistol, and they start talking big on how I could do this or I could shoot this, somebody come into my house, they dead. You really don't know what the psychological effects of taking a human life on. So when you say these things, it almost makes me want to stop the process because you're not prepared. You don't understand what you are actually taking on for the rest of your life, trying to fall asleep. Even if you take a life in self-defense, what have you done?
You've murdered somebody.
That's going to...
You've murdered somebody.
Even if you do it in self-defense, you've taken a life. I don't know if I would say it was murder, because murder is something other than self-defense in my eyes, but I understand what you're saying. You've still ended a human life.
That's right.
And I think that's some of the disconnect when most of the serial killers start messing with animals, abusing animals, killing animals, and they get that taste in their mouth.
That's crazy.
Then it becomes an adrenaline rush for a bigger target. But it's funny, people really don't realize that. And then you get into this thing where they've blamed video games and movies for the desensitization of the youth of America and the world, really, because now you get free reloads of your weapon. You can shoot somebody, you can die, all in these games, and you're still there. So have you removed humanity from these kids today?
I never agree with the argument that like TVs and movies are doing it, but the one thing that I think is, and I mean, I could be speaking out my ass right now, and of course in 10 years I could be saying something very different, but like, I think it's been proven, or at least it's been seen, like intrinsically videos or video games and shows, I don't think makes people more aggressive. But like the thing that I do think is that like social media and certain platforms are desensitizing, I think, younger people to like sexual things and other like
deviance.
Just like I'm just talking about sexual things in general, as well as like very gruesome things, and like because I've seen some pretty I've heard stories of young people seeing some things on TikTok and other stuff, and even things on Facebook of like just some pretty horrendous things. And it's like that from a kid that's like growing up and like really experiencing that in some way, like, and it being like in brilliant HD, I don't think is probably healthy in any way.
You say that, and I wonder if you're onto something, because I stated earlier that the heyday of the serial killer was the 60s, 70s, and 80s. What was that? VHS was coming out, and pornography, that was the first real access that you had to pornography, other than maybe a couple of your dad's Playboys, when you had to sneak and look at them.
Right.
Then you had these little movie theaters, the really nasty movie theaters.
Right.
But this was the first real access that kids had to pornography. True pornography.
It just makes me think, like, I just get concerned for the future sometimes, because there's some young people that I've talked to that are, middle to late teens, and it's just the way they talk about it and the way they feel about certain things is like, it just makes me concerned. I'm like,
Well, we have desensitized America to a certain extent. The first horror movie that came out was The Blob.
You told me this story, yeah.
Okay. Now,
I remember The Blob.
The Blob, the first night it came out, 3 people died of heart attacks.
That's crazy.
You know what you did not see in the movie The Blob? The Blob. You never saw the actual monster. And now today you have to have so much blood and gore just to get an effect out of you, to get something out of you, to get the sensation out of you.
Right.
We have to do so much today.
I mean, even like if we're being honest here, like there was a hot minute in time where like I talked to like a friend of mine's stepson, and he was talking about how him and his friends were talking about Squid Games. And I was like, how in the hell are you talking about what Squid Games is? I had a hard time watching that, let alone this. You're like 11 years old? Mm-hmm. That's kind of messed up. Like this like
Magnus loves Squid Games.
I was like,
he's 12, and that was one of his favorite shows that ever came out.
This glorification of like these intense games where like if you just fail, you're just killed. And like, I mean, like that's probably not the most aggressive example, but it's like, I mean,
no, it's a perfect example.
Probably like I don't know. It makes me it makes me really think about other things. Like if there's this big instance where we're all talking about this, like what about those little things we don't hear about? Those things that like because I know we were all young boys or young men at one point in time, and you had ways of being stealthy and sneaky, but it's like there are and you even talked about it yourself. Magnus has gotten really good at being real sneaky about all kind of stuff.
Yes,
and it's just crazy to think about how like I feel like I'm pretty educated in technology and like stuff now, but like I can only imagine again 13-year-old kids now and how they grew up with this glued to their hand, and it's like that's just one of those things where it's so intrinsic to all
it's so easy to find a video on how you can do anything in the world. Anything. Pick locks.
If you really
start
want
a car
to,
without a key, anything.
The amount of information you can, you're almost like it's like a massive computer.
Yes,
right.
I mean,
at this point in time, I had somebody tell me that like if you can't figure out how to do something, it's because you don't want to learn how to do it. Mm-hmm. It's like at this point in time, like you can, like if you can't watch a YouTube video on how to fix it or figure out figure out how to pay somebody to do it, like you really aren't trying. Because like you could definitely figure.
So this is our Halloween episode,
right?
Okay, so we have to get back to the scary,
okay,
and the macabre. What are you scared of?
Oh man,
what are you scared of in life? Anything?
Running
out of bourbon does not count.
I mean, in all seriousness, it's always going to be the unknown.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a big one.
It's always going to be the unknown. And that fear of, I don't have control.
Right,
okay.
Right. I inherited that trait from my mom. Love you, Mom, if you're listening. Is like a control freak side. My mom is very controlling about a lot of things, and in my adult life, I've realized, begrudgingly, I just like taking control of the scenario, and I was like, oh man. So I get that. If we can be a little lighthearted and fun, one thing I don't want to say I'm scared of, but I don't like is cockroaches. Don't know why. Whenever those sons of bitches can just like fly, and they're these. I don't like big bugs. I don't know what it is. Just I don't like bugs really. But especially if they're big and they can fly, I don't know what it is. I just get like I get antsy and I get aggressive. I just want to,
Is that what crawls under your skin? Is that really what gets you?
I don't know about that, but there's been because of where we are in the South, there are these like wood cockroaches, these big bitches that are just. I mean,
they fly.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And that's the thing is like around when I lived up in Canada, especially for like 6 to 7 months out of the year, bugs weren't a thing because it was so cold. Ain't nothing surviving out there.
Right.
So but around here, it's different. This is the breeding ground for bugs.
Everything's alive.
Everything.
Everything's alive.
Yeah, and everything's alive and 10 times bigger than it probably normally should be. Sure. That's what it feels like.
It's a bigger growing season.
Exactly. And that's the thing is like there's been
things that stink.
Yeah, and again, for some reason, horseflies around like in big fields around here. These like massive. Just imagine a horsefly. For those of you out there who may not know what a horsefly is, it's like a normal size. It looks like a regular housefly.
But it's a good dime or nickel size.
Oh my God. I mean, about as big around as your thumb is what it feels like sometimes.
Their bite does.
And they bite you.
Right, exactly.
They bite you.
There was one time I was bringing in that coffee table you see. I'll never forget this. I was bringing the coffee table on the porch, and I was like, I felt like a pain in the back of my hand, and I didn't know what it was. And I set the table down, and I roll my hand over, and there's this massive son of a bitch on the back of my hand. And I was like, oh my God. And then of course, like my fiance Mallory and my roommate Dylan were both freaking out because again, as I swat it, it's now flying around the house. It sounds like a helicopter in here. I'm like, oh gosh, trying to catch that
when
thing.
You need one of those salt.
Right.
Those are probably the neatest.
Oh man,
things.
it's super cool. I didn't have one though. I just
so no Halloween kind of scary.
like
ghosts,
I said, I was
anything like that. Do you believe in ghosts?
Yes, I well, if we're gonna get into that,
okay.
Then anything that deals with the demonic,
okay,
would be something that I would be very wary of.
Right.
Nothing like that has ever happened to me personally. I've read stories. I do believe it happens to people.
Okay.
Why it happens to some people and not others, I don't know. But if something that really kind of makes you, that kind of sends that cold chill down you, and you feel very vulnerable.
Yes.
That, to me, is scary.
Yeah.
Because I believe it's real. Mm-hmm. And when it's real, you can't joke about it.
What also, it kind of plays into, at least for the cautious fear that I have of that sort of thing, is it kind of ties into that fear of unknown. You just don't, at least I don't know. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I mean,
well, that's two fears of the unknown right there.
Well, so. Or, I mean, like for me, it's more. I wouldn't say I live my life in fear of that kind of stuff. Like, I mean, if it's one of those scenarios where, personally, there are like natural human instincts that I think you are, or at least again for a what did you say earlier? Well-adjusted average human being,
right,
is like that you should have normal fears of things that just like keep you safe. And I think that's one of those things. Like for me, it's like if I was in a scenario where that's happening, I'd be like, I'm not gonna say I'm scared, but I'm definitely gonna not get involved. I'm gonna try and keep a distance. Right. Same thing with like being on the edge of a building. It's like I don't want to say I'm scared of heights, but like if you're like being held off the edge of a building, I'd be like, I'm terrified, right? Because it's like that's a natural human reaction. But like a fear for myself, man, that's getting deep now. Besides like the surface level stuff, like for me, like if I'm the big thing for myself that I've realized is because I'm an artist and because I am a creative person, security in the future has always been a big thing. Is like.
It's kind of the unknown again.
A little bit, yeah. but more. It is a little bit of that, but more so, it's just this. I have a good thing that's going right now, and I'm making money, and I'm doing pretty good for myself. But that's never guaranteed. It's not like a career in like a retirement plan. You know what I mean? Like there's no retirement plan for the kind of stuff that I do a lot of times, and that's kind of the scary part of like. That's just
you do it as long as you need to do it,
right? And I love it, and I enjoy it, and I do have checks and balances in place now in my adult life, but 100% like late teens, early 20s, doing a lot of that stuff, doing music, doing graphic design stuff, like and just not being, not having that safety net like a lot of people were doing. I have friends that work at plants and work, that just have pretty good income, but also have that like when they're probably 60 years old, they're gonna retire or whatever from a life of hard working,
right. Well, that's actually one of the things at my job, that I have a pretty good retirement, and an additional compensation plan that I'm part of, so I'm happy about that. In the twilight of my life, I'm still going to have to work till I'm 75, but at least I have that opportunity to do that and have a retirement for Miranda and I.
Right.
So, yeah,
that's cool.
Well,
what about you? You didn't
anything scary?
Anything scary for the big bad Stoney man himself?
No, I don't want to say there's a fear for me, but I guess my biggest fear, and it's not really Halloween-esque or esque, I guess you could say, is just not being what I need to be for my family. I don't want to let them down in any way.
The fear of inadequacy.
There's monsters out there that we just talked about.
Right.
I don't want to miss anything. I want to see everything. It's hard to kind of rope Magnus in and explain to him that there are demons out there, that there are monsters out there that aren't just in books and in movies. There are bad things out there. And that's my biggest fear, is that I miss something. My head's on a swivel. I just can't stop.
That's crazy.
Because before it was just me. I could control me.
Yeah.
And the things that happened around me. My mirrors are set up differently on the vehicle to watch for different things. You might know a little bit about all this kind of stuff. Right, Jason?
That's right.
And so we do things differently. We see things differently. But now that I have this family,
right,
it's harder to see the big picture. It's harder to know that you can keep them safe from these monsters.
It's an extension of yourself that you can't quite.
There was a situation in South Louisiana the other night, and Miranda and I had driven right through it. We were 2 minutes away from that event, and it just caused me to think. We made the choice not to go have Sonic. And if we would have went to Sonic, we'd have went in the middle, but we turned left instead of turning right.
That's crazy.
And that's how close we were to it. And so that's what my fear is, making the wrong decision. What if we'd have turned right and ran right into that person that was leaving that situation?
Yeah.
I would have had to have acted, being who I am, and then put my wife in harm's way so that could be dealt with. But
that's crazy.
we turned left instead of turning right. So was God looking at it and making sure? Because all of a sudden, I just really didn't want Sonic.
Right.
I did. For 3 days, I've wanted Sonic.
Right.
And on the way to get it,
like, nah.
The divine hand of providence.
Yeah, right.
Absolutely.
Divine hand of
Absolutely.
providence.
That's crazy.
So.
That's insane, man.
Yeah.
Crazy experience.
Well, it sounds like we're winding down. I would like to give a shout out to Brianna, one of our listeners, for asking us to do the Halloween show on Jeffrey Dahmer. And there's a lot of information on him, but we kind of turned it into a serial killer fiesta, so to speak, and talk about, the multiple serial killers in America.
I don't know if I like the term fiesta.
Not really, but, hey.
Yeah, I get it.
And we got to welcome a new co-host.
Right.
It's been fun.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear.
How do you feel about it? Do you
I like it.
Yeah.
I like it.
You think you'll be back maybe?
I definitely will be back.
Is there anything else, while we're kind of winding down, is there anything you want to talk about? Anything you want to bring up? Or anything you missed that you want to...
Not really. I mean, I'm looking forward to, as we go forward, just some different topics. I'm very interested in the ancient civilizations, and I love to talk about. I believe that we have, as Graham Hancock mentioned in his many books, that we are a species with amnesia. That we have forgotten our past.
Right.
And that's an area I would like to explore in the future.
Well.
Interesting. That's crazy.
There we go.
It's so true, though. I didn't realize this until I had, like, one of those shower thoughts, like I always talk about, that it's just crazy that the average lifespan being, like, 80-ish years, and having to, even though you can like leave all this knowledge behind, like a lot of times intrinsically as a human, like you have to experience it yourself to really learn it. And it's just crazy that like that is something that has happened time and time again, year after year, or decade after decade. It's just like, there have been numerous people throughout history that have gone through their 20s, but like, no matter how hard you try and talk to an 18-year-old, you can't tell that like that you can't let them experience. Like, you can't like instill, or you can't like force them to live their 20s until they just go through it and mess up.
Well,
and just
you might need to read Graham Hancock.
Yeah,
because it goes a little deeper than that.
I believe
as a humankind.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
We have forgotten on this a whole bunch of our past.
On a small scale, I'm talking like that.
Okay.
So I can only imagine, like, again, you got to think like a very similar situation. Like, a kid still has to go through puberty and has to go through that awkward stage where they find themselves, and then they grow up into this adult, and then you make mistakes and go like, oh, now this is the kind of person I am. It's like you can, no matter how hard you like you talk to a kid or a person, like you can really shape them in a way, but like a lot of times it's kind of up to them. And then, but at that point, it's like depending on the people they had in their life, instilling that into them, they could not have any kind of like wisdom and good traits passed down to them. They're just an adult now, living life with just no guidance. It's crazy to think that like how that, you know, I feel like it's crazy we made it this far, to be honest. But I mean, you know, it's just me. All right. Well, anyways, for those of you trying to find us, you can type in facebook.com/retrospect pod, and you can reach out to us that way and talk to us. Or you can type in linktree/retrospect pod and find all of our links and all the social media stuff and ways. Or you can just type in retrospect on all the major podcasting platforms. But anyways, until next week, thank you so much for listening. Bye-bye.
Good night, everyone.
Peace.